Make America Great Again, and I'm with her. Slogans from this year's presidential election that have made their way onto countless hats, banners, buttons, and those ever-present campaign ads. For many people, probably for most people, the souvenirs quickly fade from memory once the votes are counted. But not for someone into politics like USF professor Susan McManus. She collects them and, in her own words, shares some with us from campaigns past.
Congressman, thanks for what you stand for. Thanks for your
2000
family.
election, of course, is one for the history books. But going into the election, it was an election where there was no incumbent in the race. So there was very high level of interest and a lot of competition. And of course, Florida, when all was said and done, ended up being the determinant of who won the election. There are certain kind of sets that all you do is you change out the name of the candidate from one time to another. And one of the favorites is always the idea of having your face along with those very famous presidents at Mount Rushmore. So you see a little bit of everything. They try to cover all the bases with buttons and also with their campaigns. But this button is another one that's so typical that we see almost every election, is that the centerpiece will be the current candidate, which was Gore, and around the button will be all of the presidents who were Democrats over the years. And the idea is this candidate, is, if elected, is going to join a great team of Democrats. That's the theme. 2004, it was Bush running for re-election, and he was running against Kerry. But a major part of this race was about the security of the country because we had had 9/11. This was more of a year when it was the traditionalism that we associate with the Republicans, because you didn't want to really dramatize 9/11, but yet the inference was there that security was at the heart of what he was saying was a reason to reelect him. So you see the Republicans often really tout Abraham Lincoln, but Democrats heavily link their legacy to the presidency of JFK, so you see that. But you see the beginning of the LGBT community starting to become more political. Every party has derogatory, kind of uplifting, funny, I can say uplifting, funny buttons that slam the opponent. So here it says, not Bush again, because Bush was running for re-election. If you have a cowboy look on Bush's buttons, well, you can almost predict, and it happened, that the Democrats would come back with a counter to it which says, Mama, don't let your sons grow up to be cowboys. So it's tit for tat, tat for tit, almost all the way. And not on issues as much as it is sometimes legacies and personalities. 2008 was an open race. There was no incumbent in the race. George Bush had served his 2 terms. It was clear that people were ready for a change, and you had a young black president candidate running against an older sort of war hero Republican, John McCain. So much of this campaign was really about projecting the ideas of change and hope, and also breaking the race barrier in America. This was forward-looking as opposed to retrospective looking back. And it created a much higher turnout rate than we had had in a while. John McCain was trying to tap into 2 things. First of all, the idea that Americans were still very much concerned about the security of the country, and his experience and his war hero status, having been a prisoner of war. The selection of Palin was really a shocker to everyone and was designed a lot to get the women's vote. And it also was designed to show that she had experience in public office. He never said publicly, to this day, he never says anything bad about Palin, but the history books do point to that as probably not the best decision.
Pickering and the lobbyists will be in the same place 20 years from now.
2012 was a re-election campaign for President Obama, and he was challenged by big corporate type Mitt Romney. And a lot of people thought that his business acumen would have been a good sell and a good candidate for the Republicans, but it was just not to be. It was a classic second-term type of campaign where the incumbent was a better campaigner and in the end pulled it across the line, although narrowly, because in Florida, Obama only bested Romney by 0.9%, the closest in the country.
And you know what else I prepared for? I prepared to be president.
A lot of interest in this year's election, more than we've seen in a very long time because of the unusual nature of the candidates. Hillary Clinton would be the first woman to be elected to the White House, and Trump is the first celebrity candidate who's totally unconventional in every way in how he's trying to campaign. It is interesting that this is the first election I can ever remember where a man's hairstyle has been more of a focal point than the women candidates' hairstyle. What makes this election so interesting and different is you have two candidates that couldn't be further apart in what they stand for, what they're campaigning on, how they campaign. We have a very divided country, and it's like we've never had as clear a contrast for voters. And it really kind of all comes down to this. Do you want to continue the way that the country is going, or do you want something drastically different? It's unprecedented, and it's why the polls are showing that a high percentage of Americans are really very interested in the election. The question is, will they vote?